Look, I was lucky, I knew what I wanted to do early in my life, and that's a blessing. Yeah, I mean, if you have that, that's a great luxury. You can be very focused from a young age and not distracted, and I was lucky to have that. And I was a terrible photographer, but I'd like to think I got better.
Ja, er sei anfangs ein fürchterlicher Fotograf gewesen, das sagt Brent Stirton. Mittlerweile zählt der Südafrikaner zu den renommiertesten und einflussreichsten Fotojournalisten weltweit und wurde für seine beeindruckende Arbeit unter anderem bereits 13 Mal beim World Press Photo Award ausgezeichnet. Wie er es geschafft hat, einer der besten visuellen Geschichtenerzähler der Welt zu werden, das verrät Brent Stirton in diesem Interview, das ich im vergangenen Jahr zusammen mit Pia Parolin im Rahmen der Medientage von Europas größtem Fotofestival La Gacilly Baden Photo geführt habe. Und damit herzlich willkommen zu einer weiteren Folge des Gate 7 Podcasts und zu einer ganz besonderen. Seit ich den Podcast Ende 2016 gestartet habe, sind mehr als 380 Folgen erschienen und im Laufe dieser Zeit hatte ich das Privileg, mit vielen fantastischen Fotografinnen und Fotografen zu sprechen. Aber das Gespräch mit Brent Stirton sticht sicherlich heraus. Brent Stirton, dieser Name ist untrennbar verbunden mit einer leidenschaftlichen Hingabe zur Fotografie und den drängendsten Fragen unserer Zeit. Mit zahlreichen Auszeichnungen und Veröffentlichungen in renommierten Magazinen wie National Geographic hat Brent Stirton nicht nur die Welt bereist, sondern sie auch ein wenig verändert. In seiner Arbeit beschäftigt sich Brent Stirton mit einer breiten Palette an Themen von Umweltschutz bis zu Menschenrechten. In diesem Interview erzählt er von seiner faszinierenden Reise durch die Welt der Fotografie. Er verrät, was ihn antreibt, welche Herausforderungen er auf seinen Reisen meistern muss und wie er es schafft, mit seinen Bildern zu berühren und tiefgreifende Botschaften zu vermitteln. Bevor es gleich mit dem Interview losgeht, noch ein kurzer Hinweis in eigener Sache. Unter dem Motto Post aus Buenos Aires berichte ich live bei Zoom, was ich gerade in meiner zweiten Heimat Argentinien erlebe, fotografiere und mittlerweile auch filme. Nach der Premiere vor 2 Wochen geht es am Dienstag, den 20. Februar 2024 ab 19 Uhr bei Zoom in die nächste Runde. Ich nehme dich dann mit auf meine Fotowalks durch Buenos Aires und wie das Ganze aussieht. Davon kannst du dir bereits einen kleinen Eindruck auf YouTube verschaffen. Zum Start meines neuen Kanals habe ich ein erstes Video zusammengeschnitten. Ja, vielen Dank an dieser Stelle auch an Thomas Jones für den Crashkurs im Videoschnitt. Den Link zu meinem neuen YouTube-Kanal findest du in den Shownotes zu dieser Episode. Geh dazu einfach in die Podcast-App, mit der du diese Episode hörst, oder such einfach direkt auf YouTube nach meinem Namen Kai Beermann. Den Link zum Zoom-Meeting am 20. Februar findest du ebenfalls in den Shownotes oder im Terminkalender unseres begleitenden Projekts Abenteuer Reportagefotografie. So, und jetzt geht's los mit dem Gespräch mit Brent Stirton. Viel Spaß! Hello, Brent. Thank you very much for taking the time to sit down for this interview.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for having me.
We are also sitting here with Pia Parolin, who's also taking part in the interview. So we have a nice little group here to talk. Thank you very much also for being here, Pia.
Thank you very much for letting me be part of this.
Mm-hmm. Brent, last night you were on a panel discussion talking about your work, and we saw the images that made you the photographer that you are today, one of the most award-winning and most relevant photojournalists these days. What I'm interested to know is how you got there, your journey to become this kind of photographer that you are today. And so you were born in South Africa, and in the beginning, there were no clear signs that you were going to become a photographer. There were some other career plans.
Yeah, sure. I had always, aspired to be a doctor growing up. I was always interested in joining the medical profession. My father's father was a surgeon and a guy who specialized in conflict medicine. And that was very interesting for me. So I had always imagined going down that road. Mm-hmm. But we We had a conscription in South Africa at the time. We were fighting wars in Angola and Mozambique. And, we were caught up in geopolitics at the time. So I was involved in part of that. And as a result, for the first time, I was working with black guys. I was living in apartheid South Africa and living in a segregated society. And the military experience really helped me to understand the common humanity between the two of us and, to make real brothers in that experience. So I came out of my military experience wanting to report on anti-apartheid issues. And because of the context that I had, I was able to work in the townships, speak the language, and report on what was going on in my country. And this was 1993. So there was a great deal of factional violence. It was the time of necklacings, kangaroo courts, ultra-violence in the pursuit of political ambitions. So, for me, I was writing at this point, studying journalism while I was writing. I was working for Reuters, I was working for Gamma, and they said to me, look, can you find a photographer to work with? And I couldn't find a photographer because I was working at the coast, at a place which is the heartland of the Zulu people, who, I think it's fair to say were the most warlike of the groups in the country at the time. So there was a lot of violence. There were also third force activities, et cetera, et cetera. So, most of the photographers, most of the foreign press were in Johannesburg, working out of there, whereas I was working at the coast. And it was less coverage. So I couldn't find a photographer, so I bought a second-hand camera, a Canon A1 with a squeaky shutter. And, for the next couple of years, it was just really a matter of being in the right place at the right time because a lot of things were happening. And then we had the democratic elections in South Africa, and we had a massive influx of foreign press. So I met a lot of people. And because I had contacts in the townships and, I knew the coast, I met people. And, then we had the Rwandan genocide, we had the fall of the DRC, we had the famines in Somalia, we had 5 very tumultuous years of African journalism, and I was a terrible photographer. I don't really even have a lot of pictures from that time, but I'd like to think I got better, but that's how I started.
Well, that's in a way comforting that you say that you actually took some bad pictures. But
I still take plenty of bad pictures. Yeah, no, this life is a work in progress. But very fascinating journey that you were first surrounded by all these topics that you are covering now as well. You were immersed in these topics, and then later on you found your way, your tool to tell the stories, which is the camera these days, and lots of coincidences along the way. It was not like a straight road to where you're right now. Look, I was lucky, I knew what I wanted to do early in my life, and that's a blessing. I mean, if you have that, that's a great luxury. You can be very focused from a young age and not distracted, and I was lucky to have that.
What was it then that raised the bar, the quality of your images? How did you evolve as a photographer? Was it learning on the job, learning by doing, or did you have mentors along the way that taught you what's important to take a good news photo?
Look, the thing is, I grew up at a time, I've been doing this job for nearly 30 years, so that's pre-internet, and I was working in places where you didn't have a lot of contact with other photographers. But during the elections, the 1994 elections, I met James Nachtwey, and he's been the most influential photographer for me, unquestionably. And I think across our profession, probably the most influential photojournalist. So his ethics, his framing, his combinations of potent communication combined with great aesthetics, that was very interesting for me, Yeah, so as I said, this career is always work in progress. You're always trying to get better.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You mentioned that you were lucky. You said that in your talk yesterday also. I don't really believe in luck, and that, I mean, in a way, you need a good coincidence, but I think it's more about determination, and you have a certain goal, even if you don't know exactly where that is, and then something pops up and you can like grab or recognize the situation and use it for yourself. So
sure. I mean, I think you have to be able to recognize opportunity, but you are lucky to have a singular vision, to be able to be that focused and know, okay, this is where I want to go without distraction. And that's definitely what happened for me. As far as maximizing opportunity in this job, there's a couple of ways to do this. Yeah, you're either a news person and you work through the news cycle, or you're a long-term photojournalist and you work on long-term projects, and ideally you survive through grants, etc. Or you are a features assignment person, and I am a features assignment person. So I never really worked for newspapers. I worked for magazines. So I never worked in a singular image environment. It was always essays. So I've always been interested in causality, cause and effect. Why is this happening? What are the consequences? What are the A to Z of this issue? That's how I prefer to work. I'm as interested in understanding this issue for myself as I am in being able to communicate that to a wider audience.
And how much of a new project that you start is already ready in your head, and how much is then just spontaneously taking a new direction?
Everything is interconnected. Everything, none of the stuff exists in isolation. So for me, it's trying to make those connections. So if I'm looking at, conservation issues, for example, I see that as a web, so right now I'm involved in looking at how fundamentalist Islam is affecting conservation across Africa. And that's very challenging because of access. It's very difficult to work in those areas and to be safe, and also to make effective images. But, you can understand how a project like that is multidimensional, so, but I'm really attracted to that kind of work. I'm attracted to complex themes. I'm as interested in talking to think tanks, in talking to scientists, as I am in talking to journalists and talking to my editors, etc.
There's so much involved. It's not just the taking on the picture, but all the research that goes into
the taking of the picture is the easy part. Yeah. Honestly, like by the time that, my job is 90% research and 10% photography. But that needs to happen quickly, because you need to make a living. So you need to develop the means by which to think quickly and to arrive at indisputable conclusions quickly, and then manifest those into photographic situations.
Yeah, you just mentioned access, and I was thinking this yesterday when you showed your two almost iconic photos that I had seen a lot of times before of these women who were really badly injured. And I asked myself, how does someone like you get access to a woman like that? I mean, what I mean? Yeah, a man, a white man, and these women in their religion, in their family context. Yeah. That must be such a long work that you have to do before doing this.
It's funny because there's always this supposed idea that we don't have access to those things, but I've had a lot of access to that stuff, and I think that you can, you can speak honestly to people about what your motivations are. You can try to be patient, but it's the presentation of your reasoning. It's the presentation of your motivation that affects your access. So for me, it's really just been a matter of trying to be very open about why do I want to photograph you? And then understanding that a lot of the people that you want to photograph in that situation, they want their story to be told. They don't want the suffering to go unnoticed, really, for want of a lesser cliche. So I always feel real sense of responsibility to do that in a way that has some dignity and which conveys the fact that this person matters. And I think that when I talk to these people in those situations, they get that, they understand that. There's so much about human communication that isn't about how you speak. It's about your demeanor. It's about what they sense about you. And there's also great misconception about the sophistication of human beings around the world. Just because you are a farmer doesn't mean that you are not a smart and cognitive person who is completely capable of processing the motivations of another human being and deciding for yourself whether that is something you value or not. So I go into those situations very, I'd like to think that I'm respectful. I'd like to think that I'm having an open conversation with another human being who sees the human being in me. And we arrive at a situation which either works for you or it doesn't. And a lot of people say no. I've had lots of situations where it didn't work. And that's fine. That's fine. I'm comfortable with people saying no to being photographed. That's absolutely fine. I mean, I'm actually working on something at the moment which is really challenging. I'm working on, people from the LGBTQIA communities that have been forced into hiding in Africa. And that's a whole other ball game because you're dealing with people who are speaking about themselves in ways that are new for me. So I have to develop new sensitivities to that. And that's challenging because I'm a 54-year-old guy. And I don't speak that language, but what they see is that I'm open to learning how to communicate with them. And I might not be getting it right, but my intention is clear. And I think that's the key, so I'm wide open, so for the most part, people see that. And that's where your access lies.
A question that still arises in my head is, if someone says no, how long would you still try to stay on it? In a sense that not trying to manipulate the people, but I often experience that people try to be nice and show me the nice part of their life. And I really have to go on asking questions to get deeper and deeper. So they won't just tell the story right away, and they maybe form something like a safe wall around, and you have to go through this wall. And where do you stop and where do you go through?
Look, a lot of that comes down to the research you've done ahead of time in terms of knowing the truth of the situation that you're entering into. Okay, so if you come into that situation knowing the facts, people are often surprised that you know those facts, and it disarms them. They go, oh, okay, this person actually really understands what's happening in my community or with me. People are also perpetually disappointed by journalists, because people, and it's often well-intentioned, but people come in there and they peddle hope. You understand? They are, at the same time, it remains a truism that if you're not talking about what's happening to you, then it will remain with you, and I think it must be exhausting for Ukrainians, for example, at the moment, to deal with journalists. It must be exhausting for, the woman of Afghanistan to have to deal with yet another journalist, etc. But there is, I think people do understand that there is a need to keep talking about these things. As far as getting to the truth of the matter, as far as people saying no to you, I accept that. There is a level where you can see that this person is emphatic. They're not being coy. They don't want to talk to you. They don't want to be photographed by you. And that's fine. There's a limit as to how much you can impinge on someone's dignity. Look, it's challenging because you have two situations. You have a dynamic one where people are wounded or they are, in terrible circumstances, or there's been a natural disaster and you're photographing something evolving in real time. I tend to end up in quieter situations than that most of the time, where it's a direct question. It's like, I'm in your space. This has happened to you. Will you show me what happened to you? And then it really comes down to the purity of your intent and how they sense that. I mean, that's it. That's all you have. you know. But like I say, I think that people can tell a lot from your demeanor. And you can also, you know, if you know you're going to go into those situations, to take examples of work you've done before is not a bad idea, you know. And also when I'm in communities where maybe I'm working in West Papua, I'm working in Borneo, I'm working in places where, okay, they don't see National Geographic, or they don't see Geo, or they don't see Stern, or so take it with.
Yeah.
And explain the concept of Western media, and take the time to do that. And explain, look, this is the readership. This is what it means. So if I photograph you, you will be seen by this many people. And I can't guarantee that it's going to change anything for you. But it is an effort at communicating what's happening. So I just talk gently and patiently to people like that. And most of the time, 70% of the time, people allow me to photograph them. But I don't do that casually. Yeah? It's there's some responsibility to that. You know, it's, yeah.
How attached do you get to the people you photograph and to their stories? Because, like, as you said, you really take time to understand their situation. You do a lot of investigation, and you see lots of things. You see people in crisis, very vulnerable. What does it do with you?
The key to working in this profession long term is building those relationships, so that, you know, our jobs are cyclical. You're going to go back to certain places time and time again. So being able to go back into communities where you've been before and have that community go, oh, okay, we know you. You didn't screw us before. You told the truth about what's happening. Maybe it changed something. Maybe it didn't. Most of the time it won't. But we appreciate the consistency of your intent. Okay. That's all you have, you know. But what I will also say is that we live in a social media world now. So when we make impactful pictures, they tend to appear on social media in some way, whether it's posting yourself, whether it's the magazine posting, or whether it's someone, you know, sees an image of yours and posts it and comments, et cetera, et cetera. That's the world we live in. So, you know, a lot of the time, that can be a positive. It can lead to fundraising. It can lead to that sort of thing, but it can also lead to misinterpretation. So you have to be very clear in your own mind as to what your motivations were, what you were doing, and what that time was like with that person, you know, so that you can defend your motivations and your reasons for being there. But you live in a time where you're not going to win all the people all the time. That's never going to happen. And I'm fine with that. You know, at a certain point, you know, you can build these relationships in these communities, etc. But you also move on to the next story, and people understand that. You know, look, it's not a perfect profession. It isn't, and I would be lying if I said that there haven't been times where you feel that you've been exploitative, etc. That's a natural part of working with people or communities or environments where there's been suffering and it hasn't impacted you directly. That's natural. Okay. But you are also making choices to be there and to try to do that kind of work. You know, I'm not a hedge fund manager. The motivation of my life is not to make money, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, as I say, it's not a perfect science.
Yeah. Yesterday, the talk was about what kind of impact images can have these days. Also, and you gave some good examples. You talked about specific images that have had an impact. Can you name like one or two examples of images that had a direct impact with people, like as a reaction that they raised awareness, that made people donate money and jump on a course?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been lucky because I've had a few of those. All right, so I did a story on the connection between ivory and terror groups. I did a story on the connection between ivory and organized religion. In both cases, those stories changed legislation in Congress in America. So when it came to ivory and terror groups, there's an American director called Catherine Bigelow, and she made an infomercial which painted Al-Shabaab as the largest ivory poachers in the world. Now, myself and my writing partner at the time, Brian Christie, we looked at this and we knew that wasn't true. So we decided, okay, well, who are the groups that really benefit from this? And we identified 5 groups where we knew, okay, these guys definitely do this. Al-Shabaab makes their money from Saudi and from charcoal, and some piracy. That's how they make their financing. It's not from ivory, right? That'd be a side business at best. Anyway, in the course of that story, we traced the path. We put a tracker into a tusk, and we followed the movement all the way up to Joseph Kony's camps. And we did various things where we could verify exactly who was doing what. There was no bullshit. These are the facts, And again, that was an example where when we tracked down the advisors to Catherine Bigelow, they couldn't defend their position. So, be careful, because people will tell you something, but you have a responsibility to research that yourself, And in the course of that story, what happened was that Hillary Clinton got involved. The American Congress and the Senate decided that they would spend more money on anti-poaching because they recognized that it was an incredible intelligence gathering mechanism. So AFRICOM, the American military in Africa, began a closer relationship with certain organizations as a monitoring tool because they saw the connection, So that was helpful. On the previous story on ivory and organized religion, the Pope and the Vatican changed their policies on ivory, and how the manifestation of religious idealism within the Catholic space, they talked about the fact that that's not something that should continue in this, using this substance. A priest in the Philippines was excommunicated, and we exposed a guy who was wanted for pedophilia in America, who had escaped to the Philippines. We also disrupted a number of online businesses that were using Facebook and other things to move ivory. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it's big, and sometimes you hear things, but there's no way to verify that. So, in 2007, I made a photograph of a group of mountain gorillas that had been killed, and I was told by conservationists that I respect that it raised a great deal of money. But where that money went, I can't say. Ultimately, that's not my job. My job is to make verifiable information available so that people can make up their own minds. And ideally, you talk to the corridors of power, and they use that for good. That's the best we can hope for.
But these examples show that there is a clear impact that you make with your images, and that's something these days that sometimes is, there's always a discussion, like what kind of impacts do photos or does photojournalism have these days with the amount of images, the amount of information that's out there. But this is quite hopeful to hear that, it actually, if you put in the work, if you do the research, and if you present verifiable information and you do a good job, then there is an impact.
Well, look, I think we see every day that it's valuable. I do. I mean, when you look at the impact of AI, when you look at the rise of fake media and the way that, truth telling is propagandized, and you look at the way that that's become a popular phenomenon, based on people like Trump, et cetera, I think we're entering an era of journalism where authenticity is going to have to become a more guarantee-based phenomenon. And so you see people like Adobe working on authenticity, working on being able to guarantee that this is not a manipulated situation. You see companies like Getty and others taking on AI companies, and that debate escalating into a value system. We need that. We need a system of ethical checks and balances now. And so what I'm hoping is that we will see the emergence of standards that are transparent. And what I hope that brings is a greater value to our profession. Because that's what's necessary now. We need to be able to combat things by being seen to be above manipulation. And that's the key to our profession going forward.
Yeah. That's interesting to hear that you say that there is, or the media outlets that you work with, they are there, they have this on their agenda to construct or to put in place value systems and checks and balances to confront the challenges that come with AI.
Well, I mean, it doesn't even have to be AI. If you look at the way Fox News is reported, if you look at the manipulation of news by Breitbart, by other right-wing media, etc., just the exclusion of the truth, just the evolving of cult of personality rather than reporting the facts. If you look at the voting machine controversy with Fox News, etc., guys, if we don't do this, you're going to see civil war. You will see civil conflict because you've confused the population to the point where they're angry. You've polarized the population to the point where reconciliation and a mutual sense of forward progress is impossible. If you paralyze society like that for your own gain, you'll see conflict.
Yeah.
So we absolutely have a responsibility to do that. And I'd like to see, honestly, it would be great if we could evolve some sort of global body where, the leading papers, the leading magazines, there's some sort of, almost like platform of elders that represents a standard and that standard becomes an absolute. We're going to need that.
Yeah.
Because there's just too many things that are, designed to manipulate truth-telling for their own agenda.
Yeah.
You said an important sentence, information disarms the people. And I wonder, with all these subjects that you are approaching, like conservation, women, even pedophilia, LGBTQ, Islamic probes, everything, how do you find even the time to get all the information in depth? Like, do you have a team working with you, or
Look, I'm fortunate that I work with good journalists. It's two brains, and I work on multiple things. But when I'm on the plane going to that particular story, that story is what I'm focused on. I come off that story, then I move back into a space where I'm preparing multiple projects. But while I'm on the ground, that is my focus. Look, the thing is, we live in a time where information is accessible. I can be sitting in the Sudan under a tree and I can do my research. As long as I have my, some kind of satellite modem or whatever it is. But that's more accessible and more affordable than it's ever been. So, when you said, information disarms people, I think it also arms them, and my job is to, once again, create this verifiable source of information that is in support of truth-telling.
You say you work with reporters as a team, that you take pictures and you have a reporter that provides the text. How does that work, or this teamwork look, or what does it look like? How does it work?
I mean, it's different here. Different reporters have different ways of working, etc. But to a large extent, you're engaged in the same thing. You want to understand a phenomenon and report on that phenomenon. So there's a lot of discussion. I mean, for me, I do my research and I compile a thesis. It every time it looks like that. So I've been fortunate to do a lot of work for National Geographic magazine, and they require a thesis. So you write a proposal, and that proposal goes before the society, and they come back, and there's a discussion. I'm also required to talk about what I think the photographs will be, what the budgets will be. So there's a lot of thinking that goes into it before you go out the door. At the same time, we're always wary of preconceived ideas. So we are open to what we encounter, but we try to assemble the best information we can before you go into the field. And that's often the difference between working on features and working on news. Working on news, you're responding to something in real time. You're doing as much research as you can, but you're also learning in real time. That can be a different thing, but obviously also, it's always interesting that, like, the New York Times, on the second or third page, they always used to have a little section where if there was a mistake in their reporting, they would say, we got this wrong. And they put a correction. And I always admired that, because when you consider the immensity of that job, these guys have got to report all over the world in real time on an issue. They're doing the best that they can with very experienced people on the ground. But occasionally they're going to get something wrong. It's almost impossible not to. But again, it's a question of their intent. They went into the situation as honestly and transparently as possible. They reported what they thought to be the complete truth. They then learned that, okay, we didn't get that right, or we didn't include that particular piece, but then they put it back in the paper. Perfect. That's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
It's like, especially when you're dealing with an evolving news situation, and honestly, it's the same for me in the sense of doing features. You do the best research that you can, but you will always find that once you get into the field that something might be not quite as you thought, or we didn't consider this, etc. But as long as you report on that, then I see no issue. And that's also where, having two brains, having a guy or a woman that's with you who is writing, it informs your pictures. And sometimes my pictures inform their writing, A lot of the time we don't work together, With Geographic, the photographers usually get a couple of weeks longer in the field than the writers because we have to do our job in real time. They can go back and ruminate and think about the issue. They can access information online, on phone calls, Zoom, etc. We can't do that. But yeah, two brains always better than one.
Yeah, exactly. You said that you rather work in multiple images in the essay form, and not the single image. What is the difference? I imagine, like, when you have a single image, only there's other requirements that have to go into the composing of the image, including the information then, and when you have more space to tell a story.
Yeah, it's a space issue. I mean, look, the guys working for the New York Times, they're generally publishing a single image at a time, but they are also creating essays, and you see them largely in the digital domain, okay? But guys that are daily news photographers, usually it's a single image that makes it into the paper, right? For me, a lot of the stuff I'm working on, it's wrong for me to say that it's more complex, because everything's complex. Yeah. But I generally have more space in which to talk about the story. So that's a luxury, But at the same time, your average magazine story is between 8 to 12 pages. If it's Geographic and you're really lucky, you might get 20, but that includes the words. Yeah. So, yeah, man, it's... space is always the most elusive thing, so you must make primary images that speak most conclusively to the subject matter that you're dealing with. Looking
at your images, you have this combination between on the one side the aesthetics, the artistry, and the content, the narrative that go into your images. An example for that, like using an out of camera flash, the portraits that you do. Can you elaborate a little bit on that technique and why you use it?
Sure. Look, I've used lighting since the year 2000, so one, I like the fact that it gives you a different look, because so much of the issues that we cover, they're repetitive, so if I can make something that looks a little different to what happened before, then maybe you'll look at it for a little bit longer. Secondly, I like the fact that it can give a little celebrity to the subject. A lot of the people that I meet, they're deeply honorable people, and I want, I want to celebrate them. So lighting is a way of doing that. Thirdly, I'm often asked to do impossible jobs, like, can you cover a country in a week? Can you cover a really complex issue in a week? And one way of dealing with that is to make documentary portraits in which I can try to shoot something meaningful, and some of the issue you will see in the person. That's another way of doing it. I also spoke about the fact that I do quite a lot of lighting where I simply teach a local person how to hold a light on a pole. And then I teach them, okay, if you stay 5 meters from me and you stay at this angle, no matter where I go, if you are at that angle to me, I can work. Then it's simply a way of creating photojournalism, which, one, I'm not influencing events, but I am photographing it in a slightly different manner. But all of that is designed to maintain your attention just for that much longer. It's designed to maximize a situation where often I can't shoot in good light. I have no time. You know, I've got to get from this town or this village to this place. That means I've got to drive 200 or 500 kilometers that day. So I must shoot you now at 12 o'clock in the worst possible light. And it looks terrible. So, you know, how can I work with that to improve it? And so lighting is one answer to those situations. You know, it's just a tool.
And when it comes to constructing your narratives in a photo essay with several images, how do you go about constructing a compelling narrative with many images? What kind of images do you need to tell?
Okay, so look, the classic National Geographic way is that you want to open your essay with 3 or 4 truly important, all-encompassing pictures, okay? And then you want to fill that from that point onwards. So I tend to shoot large essays. I mean, my finished edits are usually 100 pictures plus, you know? And there's a couple of reasons for that. But in terms of how I construct my essay, you know, I'm trying to firstly cover the A to Z of something, but I'm doing that by first identifying what I think are the most important aspects of this issue. And so I'm going, all right, well, I need a picture to support each of those points. And then I need to assemble those pictures in order of the importance of that issue within that narrative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
That's how I think about it. You know, so it's very linear and it's very based on how important I think that issue within the greater essay really is. You know, and then, you know, look, we live in a time, guys, where we don't make a lot of money. So if I have the opportunity to shoot an essay, I will shoot it in many different, you know, I try and shoot it in a number of different ways while I'm working, because what that gives you is the ability to publish that essay in different forms.
Right.
And that's important because, you know, these days budgets are so small that you might actually just cover your expenses. So if you can, ideally you do want to try and sell that story another 3-4 times if you can. And that's hard to do now. But that was always the model. That's the model I grew up with as a journalist. And it's the model that I believe in, you know. So, you know, in a time where a magazine has no money, they can maybe support your travel. But, you know, so you come back, they publish that essay. Then I talk to another country and I go, okay, I have this body of work. You don't have to pay me to go there, but I have this work. What can you afford to buy the essay? And guys, 30 years ago, people made really good money doing this. Now you survive. But if I shoot an essay for National Geographic, it is the greatest opportunity in print for the issue, but it is also the greatest opportunity to build an essay that you might be able to put into different forms and sell to other people once the embargo period is finished.
Right. So you assemble the material to...
Look, you know, you have to, in order to live and sustain yourself in this profession, you have to also remember it's a job. You know, it's a business. So you're in the business of truth-telling, and that's primary. But once you've compiled those essays, you need to move them to other audiences. And the more variety you can bring to your essay, the greater chance you have of publishing it elsewhere.
Yeah.
Just makes sense. You know?
Absolutely, yeah, it does.
Well, I think that everybody who takes photos tries to bring some meaning into their photos, and which is the difficult part. And as far as I understood from you now, the only way to do that is not to look for, I want to win an award or something, but to have the real interest in in the people, in the story. And I wonder if you get an assignment to which you don't commit to 100%, do you succeed in your photos? Like, do you really have to be 100% involved yourself with your passion?
Look, I'm the kind of person I see the good in people. Sometimes that's a failing on my part, but for the most part, I'm optimistic about people. And how that translates is that no matter what you ask me to do, I'm going to see something in that which is compelling. That's part of my job. That's part of why I'm the right person to do this job. You understand? It's like, you get biologists who they're dialing that in. You're phoning in the job, and so maybe you're not the right person for the job. But I think that journalists who survive in this profession, they have a natural ability to see the story within any phenomenon. So yes, there have been stories where I'm like, okay, what am I going to do here? But amazingly enough, that generally tends to work out. And then sometimes that can be a matter of making a very technical picture. Or, it can be one that involves a choice of aesthetics or formats. Or it can be a matter of like, all right, I thought this about a story, but in fact, this person was far more multidimensional than I expected. So how good was your ability to get inside that person's head and understand who they are as a person, what they really do, what the potential of their job really is? What did you bring to the perception of that story? Am I making sense? Because I think often you hear, oh, this person does this job, or this story is about this theme, and you see limitation. Your job as a journalist is just to see beyond that. It is. Do
people or groups or NGOs sometimes come up to you and ask you to do something to help them? I think of, Minamata, the project.
Yeah, sure.
Does this happen to you?
Look, it's almost impossible to do our job without working with NGOs at some point, because often they're the only people with logistics in the areas where we work. So, of course, you work with them. It's always important to maintain an objective relationship. But I also work directly with NGOs on some of their work, and I have no problem with that. It's easy to know. To do investigations into the kind of work people do. It's easy to understand, okay, if you work with Doctors Without Borders, these are good people. If you're working with groups that are maybe less well known, then you have a responsibility to investigate them. But, and that's interesting because if you work with corporates, the same things apply. But I've always felt that it's better to be in the boardroom talking to the directors than to be standing outside with a sign protesting. I'd rather be having the dialogue with those guys. You have a greater chance of success of getting them to increase their CSR program or to maintain or even continue with medical distribution or whatever it is. The thing with working as a journalist, you can, it's almost impossible to work in isolation. Mm-hmm. You have partners in the field, and those partners can be ICRC, they can be Reporters Without Borders, Doctors Without Borders, they could be Save the Children, they could be UNICEF, whatever it is. You're not going to be able to work without contact with those people at some point in your career. So, I'm sorry, I think I'm forgetting your original question.
You answered the question that was, if people come up to you with projects that maybe are not funded, but they have a real issue that they need support for, like this. I said as an example, the Minamata project with W. Eugene Smith, which is a bit iconic.
No, look, and there's lots of things that come out of that. And the thing is, you meet incredibly dedicated, well-intentioned people, and those people deserve your help. Look, I also give a lot of pictures to people. I really have no problem doing that. It's the least that I can do. And I do a lot of talks on behalf of different NGOs, and I've done plenty of auctions of prints, etc., etc. Again, it's the least you can do. It's not that difficult to see good people, and to be in support of them. And why wouldn't you do it? I think it's quite selfish to consider not doing it.
You won so many awards, 13 World Press Photo Awards and several others. What do these awards mean to you, and how, well, it's one way to measure success of your work, but do you have any other measures of success that are more on a personal level, maybe?
Yes, absolutely. look, awards are confusing. Yeah. Just remember, I'm 54 years old. I've been doing this for a long time. So yes, I've won a lot of stuff, but I've won it over the course of 30 years. So I'm not some sort of prolific award winner. It's just, I've just been doing this for a long time. You need to be careful of awards because you begin to have pressure to win more. There's a sense of expectation to win more. And that can be, you need to be careful because that can affect the direction that you're thinking, and you can find yourself subscribing to a pressure that you don't necessarily need to feel, you know. The best thing with awards is that it helps to give your work a second life. That's been really good because people might, you publish something and a week later it's gone. People forget about it, or maybe it lingers in the minds of people, but they forget about it. Award season comes around and you win, that piece lives again. And often it can mean that it'll get published again. So you go to World Press, you go to POI, you go to whatever it is, Visa, etc. And you'll meet someone and they might want to publish that piece again. Thank you very much. That's a phenomenal piece. But another aspect of awards is that it forces you to go through your work at the end of every year. And that's a good exercise. Because you're editing your thinking process. You're looking at what did I actually do this year? What might I do better next year? You're also really forced to confront whether you're doing good work or not, and to be honest about it. A lot of what I do is shit. It's really not good, and when you go through that editing process every year, you are in a process of refinement. And I think whatever profession you do, you should have an audit of your efforts every year. And that's really what awards are for photographers. It's an audit of what you did that year, So, it's an opportunity to grow. It also, I'd be lying if I'd said that it didn't matter to publications. It does matter. It keeps you in the mind of editors, and that's like any career that matters. But yeah, you do have to be careful of not subscribing to the pressure to win. Yeah, that is a reality. I think people like the New York Times, etc., feel that more. The agencies feel it more in terms of the Pulitzers. But that is in the thinking of, because it's a direct manifestation of success, and people want those benchmarks. It's an affirmation, it's a business success, etc. But the vast majority of photojournalists that I meet that I think are really good at their jobs, that's certainly not their primary motivation. It's a byproduct of their efforts, but it's not their primary motivation. But it does help keep you in the field. Yeah. And that's just a reality,
And what are your personal benchmarks for success?
Personal benchmarks are the respect of my peers. I'm fortunate to know some of what I think are the greatest photojournalists of our time, and the ability to be friends with those people and have them treat me with respect means more than anything. I'll give back anything I ever won for that. Thank you. I won National Geographic's Photographer Award. I think that was in 2016. And that's an award where the photographers of the magazine vote on who they think is the guy that the man or the woman who they felt did the best work that year. That sort of thing is very valuable. And that's not a public award, etc., but that is, the respect of your peers and the ability to have dialogue on an equal footing with people that are legends in your mind. That's amazing. Like I had an experience with Jim Nachtwey a couple of years ago in France where he had a major retrospective, and I don't know him very well, but he knew my work, and that blew me away. That blew me away, because he was important to me. So, yes, I will give back everything I ever won for those 5 minutes of seeing you from someone who you respect at that level.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Wow.
It's just the truth,
On your website, there's this one sentence that photography has blessed you with an incredible life. You went to so many places, you saw so many things, an incredible, exciting way of life. What is it that photography has taught you about life?
Look, honestly, the commonality of humanity. Really, for want of a lesser cliche, that the fact is that, of all the countries in the world, we have far more in common with each other than we have difference. Far more. I mean, we all want the same things. That's really the thing. So, the great irony of is how divisive, the world is and how polarized it's become in spite of the fact that we have so many similar values. That's probably the number one thing that I've learned. And the fact that people are generally good. People are well-intentioned and are pure of heart far more often than you'd expect. And also the graciousness of the poor, the absolute open-heartedness of people with nothing. That's been a constantly humbling experience in my life. And I wish I could do a better job of bringing that perspective, of living that perspective, because I come home, I live in California. My wife wants to live in California, and we have a child with special needs. So there are facilities in California that are better for him. But it's always a surreal experience to come from a place where people have demonstrated such graciousness to you, than to be confronted with very Western problems, which are not problems at all, But yeah, it would be, I wish I could do a better job of communicating that and living that.
This is, staying on that topic, what you just mentioned, to travel between these very different worlds. What does that do with you? And are you able to, when you're in California with your family, to be with them without having to process what you might have seen on a previous assignment?
Yeah, it's work in progress. I mean, that never changes. It's look, the thing is, you have the immediacy of a 5-year-old. So it's like, indulging yourself flies out the window, because when I get home, my wife is exhausted, and rightly so. And I am guilt-stricken because I'm providing for my family and doing my job, but I'm not being the father that I should be. So you are caught up in the human drama that's so much of it. We all feel that, so yeah, what you're talking about is an indulgence, but to a large extent, it's an indulgence for single people who do not have kids.
Yeah,
that's the reality, Yeah, I'm not a subscriber to the romantic idea that you are, that the things that you see and the things that you experience in your professions should come to dominate your life and be more important than your family or your other responsibilities. PTSD is a real thing, and I've had some of that, but I also find that the realities of my life balance that out, and committing to my responsibility for those realities balances that out.
Yeah,
that's how it's worked for me. And yes, there are that's a person by person thing, but that's what I would hope for.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much, Brent. It was a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on photography, telling about your incredible career. I really enjoyed it, and thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you. I mean, look, ultimately, I'm still pinching myself that I do this for a living, I'm still waiting for someone to turn around and say, listen, that's enough of that bullshit. This is who you really are, so I just feel lucky. I mean, I don't stack bricks for a living. I'm not out there picking up garbage. It's a privileged life. Yeah. So thank you for having me.
Well, all the best for what's to come.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Ja, das war das Interview mit Brent Stirton. Ich hoffe, es hat dir gefallen, und falls du den Gate 7 Podcast bislang noch nicht abonniert hast, dann würde ich mich freuen, wenn du dies künftig tust. Und wie eingangs erwähnt, nehme ich dich am 20. Februar 2024 ab 19 Uhr wieder bei Zoom mit auf die Straßen von Buenos Aires. Ich bin ja aktuell in meiner zweiten Heimat und berichte dir, was ich hier fotografiere und filme. Einen ersten Eindruck davon kannst du dir auf meinem neuen YouTube-Kanal verschaffen. Da gibt es ein erstes Video. Schau da gerne mal rein, und alles Weitere dann am 20. Februar ab 19 Uhr. Tour. Den Link findest du in deiner Podcast-App. Ich würde mich freuen, wenn du dann mit dabei bist. Vielen Dank fürs Zuhören und bis zum nächsten Mal. Dein Kai.